Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing okay. Uh, Quick intro. As most of you already know, Patients Engage is an online platform operational for over 5 years and focused on holistic and evidence based management of chronic conditions from the perspective of patients and family caregivers. We believe in the value of lived experiences and strongly believe that being engaged and empowered uh, leads to better quality of life and better health outcomes. Over the last uh, few months with our webinars, we allow you to interact with experts with lived experiences, their family members, as well as healthcare professionals. And here is a quick recap of some of the work we have done or webinars we've done on cancer. So, as part of what we call the Cancer Power Circle series, we have which we started during COVID. We have been doing a series on of webinars which address a wide number of cancers as well as a wide variety of issues. We've talked of oral cancer, bladder cancer. We've done a whole series on breast cancer survivorship issues, staying fit after breast cancer, body image issues, side effects, lymphedema, uh, and so on. And we've also covered aspects of cancer prevention and risk reduction, including for persons with disability. So one of the webinars we had done was we had spoken to a couple of mothers and a psycho-oncologist on how you should be talking to your children about your cancer diagnosis and your experience, right? And with that, we felt that we should look at the other aspect as well as to what the children feel about it. And so today, here we are. We have with us three panelists, Krina Majithia, Anjali Sabnis, and Ashwati Mariam Varghese. Um, I think in the last few years, as we've spoken to many patients, caregivers, we often hear parents, especially mothers, talk about how mature their daughters were, how they quickly grew up. And we thought it's good to hear from these daughters as well, right? And as it turns out, today is National Girl Child Day of India. So let's look at what they felt when they were girls themselves, right? Um, the session will be moderated by the two of us. There's Sheetal Patel, who's my colleague, and I'm Aparna Mittal. I'm founder of Patients Engage. Um, Quick reminder for all those who've missed those previous webinars, you can find them on our YouTube channel. And if you don't want to miss any others, you can follow our Patients Engage page on social medias. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, uh, YouTube, as well as what am I missing? And LinkedIn. And if you are specifically interested in cancer, if you're a patient, you're a survivor, you're a caregiver, you can also join our Cancer Power Circle on Facebook group. Um, One thing to remember is that the discussion here is based on the experience of panelists and it's not medical advice. So please do consult your doctor for specific medical issues. This session is being recorded. So if you're logged into Zoom, you can post your questions on the Q&A box. And if you're on Facebook, you can post your comments on the live feed. And as always, you can write to us at editor@patientsengage.com. So let me, okay, no, I think that's about it. And yes, always we remind you to say no to tobacco. And, as I said, join the Cancer Power Circle. So I think because there are three of them, let me quickly go through them one at a time. Um, if you can tell us how old you were when you first heard about your mother having cancer and the way you were told. So let's start with you, Anjali, if you can talk about it first.
Right. So I was 14 when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I got to know maybe a week after she was diagnosed. Yep.
Right. And um, How did that? Okay, let's come to that later. Trina, if you want to tell us how that worked out.
Uh, so I was 14 years old when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I remember I have a very vague memory of us going for a walk, and my mom reminded me that we sat on a bench. I cried for a while when she broke the news, and she told me that she'll come out strong from this. So that's all I remember.
Right, right. Um, Ashwati.
Yeah, it was in 2011. I was 10 years old when my mom was diagnosed. I think it was after a hospital appointment. I remember standing outside the doors of the hospital, and my parents told me that she had been diagnosed and she had a lump in her breast. And this was shortly after my brother was born. So the two events seem to have like clubbed themselves uh, in my
in
memory.
in your memory, right? Anjali, you said you were told a week later. How did your how did that conversation go? Were you kind of taken aside? Were you made to sit, or as Krina said, did you get taken for a walk? Kind of what was the process?
It was broken quite abruptly to me over the dinner table, where my father just announced, "So your mom has cancer."
Mm,
And I believe he intended to say more, but he got too choked up to proceed with it. And I broke down in tears at that, because all I associated cancer with was death.
mm,
And my mom had to take over then to console me and then give me a little bit more details about what was actually going on and how she would be treated.
mm, okay. And did that conversation reassure you? Do you remember that, or it was still too early to say
It,
reassured?
yes, I think it was a bit too early for me to form any kind of opinions about how it was going to go.
Right. And were there, Sheetal, jump in whenever you want, but were there any further conversations that you all had with your parents? Rina, do you remember,
I
any other
don't think. Sorry. So I do not think I had any further conversation with my parents. It was just the walk.
right, right. So after that, there were no conversations. You kind of observed all the comings and goings and everything.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So, Krena, Anjali mentioned that her mom went through what the process was going to be like from then
Mhm.
on. The treatment.
Mm.
Did anybody talk to you about what was going to happen after the diagnosis?
I don't remember exactly, but I don't think I had this sort of a conversation with anyone.
Okay, Aswati, I know you were much younger.
Yeah, since I was 10, they didn't care to elaborate a lot about the specifics, but they gave me a general idea about what it was that she was facing.
Right, right. Um, and do you remember who you talked about it to? Who was the first person that you spoke about it to? Um, okay, I'll just pick Ashwati.
In the nuclear family setup, when both of your parents are very much involved in the treatment process and you have like a small brother, you don't exactly have anyone to vent to at home. So I depended on school for that, and I did have a support system there. So I had this really supportive group of teachers. So I went and confided in them. And my group of friends, they were also 10. They didn't know much about it, but they still tried to be strong for me and told me, "You've got this. You're going to get through it." They were supportive too. And my
Right,
family, yes, they were extremely supportive throughout. So if I needed to vent, I always had people to listen.
right, right. Anjali.
Much like Ashwathi, I also have a nuclear family, and I think the first person that we informed was my class teacher because she had to know that
Mm,
my mom has cancer. So just the official information being passed, and I mentioned it to a friend of mine, but that didn't really go all that well.
right, right. Um, and once your teachers were told, did you see? Because in your case, Anjali, your parents told your teachers, right? So, um, did you find your teachers supportive during your classes, or did they kind of acknowledge that you might have, you know, difficult moments in class, and so on? Any of that you remember?
I think they definitely tried to be supportive in their own way, but there was some unintentional insensitivity on their part,
Mm,
because it was more about coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you have to be strong for your mother," rather than reassuring me or asking me how I was going.
right,
So it just ended up being a lot of platitudes being thrown my way.
right, right. And you, Krina, did you talk to anybody in school? Who did you speak with?
So I told my friends about this, like hardly two, three people. I was a very private person back then. So I just told them about the cancer. And uh, I think my teachers noticed some unusual behavior in my class. So I did not participate in any of the activities. So I think they asked a friend of mine about what was happening. My friend told my teachers, so they came to know about this via my friend and not me. And then my dad was called to the school and he was asked like what is going on and everything. And after my teachers came to know about this, they checked up on me regularly, which is very thoughtful, I guess.
Right, right. Um, and I think Anjali, you mentioned that there was an incident in class, right? Where so if you can just talk about that a little bit.
Right. This actually happened post my mom's treatment. And I was still very sensitive to mentions of cancer. And there was some discussion going on in the class about how we had to take a field trip to a cancer research hospital. And that triggered me, and I broke down in tears and I had to leave. And as I was leaving, a student commented, why is she kicking up such a fuss? It's not like her mom died or something.
Mm,
And that was a very, very shocking statement to hear.
correct, correct. Okay.
Did
Anybody else?
yeah,
Sorry.
sorry. I just wanted to ask, did any of you meet with a school counselor, or was a school counselor available for you guys to talk to?
I had a school counselor in my school, but I did not have any interaction with her regarding this.
And your teacher didn't say that, look, if you're not feeling, if you need to, you can talk to the school counselor.
Not exactly to the school counselor, but my teachers checked up on me regularly.
Okay, okay. Um, Anjali and Ashwati, did you have school counselors? And did you? No.
We didn't have a post of school counselor, but then all teachers, we had a life skills teacher,
Mm,
and she took a step in making me feel more included in things. Yeah.
okay, okay. And did you all, accompany your mothers on hospital visits? Ashwati, I know you were very small, but did you ever go?
No, not even for a consultation. No, they kind of
Right,
kept me out of the loop in that regard.
right. So, you never sat along with her while she went through her chemo or any such thing. Krina?
I went to the hospital twice. So, after my mom's second surgery and after her last chemo, I visited her.
Right, right.
And what
Uh,
was that experience like, Rina?
I don't remember much about it, but I do remember one instance where we were coming back from the hospital and I was just quiet. I mean, I was blank at that time.
mm,
I couldn't even cry, I was that blank.
right, right. Anjali, you did go to the
I was
hospital?
Yes, I visited her plenty. She was in the hospital a week after her surgery, so I visited every day for quite a few hours at an end.
Mm,
And for her chemotherapy sessions, it usually happened during my school days, so I didn't get to attend. But one time, when my father couldn't make it because his flight got cancelled, I had to go and handle it. So I visited the the chemotherapy session as well and handle all of the admin stuff.
Oh. And
Was
again,
that,
how,
yeah,
yeah,
was that very daunting for you to, like, go to a chemo ward and see the other
I think
patients as well?
I think in a way doing those tasks helped take my mind off the emotional aspect of it. So I was just buried in the routine of like running to the blood lab and all the things that you have to get done. So I couldn't focus on the fact that there's chemicals being pumped into my mother.
mm, right. Um, and I know we talked about friends and teachers, but did you all, you know, talk to other relatives along the way? Was there kind of, an aunt or somebody who opened the channel and said, okay, come and talk to me, or a neighbor? Um, was there, or, sometimes you have uh, a friend's mother. Um, any of those kind of things happened? Anybody
Well, my
has? Yeah.
relatives, my grandmom and one of my mom's family, I mean, they came and they stayed. And it was a messy situation at home, right? A 1-year-old running about and
Mm,
mom in treatment. So to handle that, we had a lot of help. And if I wanted to talk, they were there. So from the
right.
family
But they
side,
didn't specifically say, okay, look, if you want to talk.
no, no.
No. Yeah. I think that is something that you observe, right? There needs to be a need. I mean, I think all of us fall into this trap is we don't recognize that somebody needs to open the channel and say, yes, it's okay to come and talk. Um, I think we assume that the person who needs to talk will talk, but I think there needs to be kind of a default permission given, kind of thing. Anything else that you want to add, Krina or Anjali?
I mean, we have a family friend, so I used to go to their house and spend time there. But I don't remember venting out my feelings to someone.
Right, right. Um, and you, Anjali?
My aunt did come down from Kenya to look after my mom during the post surgery period, the one
Mm,
week that she was in the hospital. But she was so inundated with all the tasks and looking after me as well that I didn't want to burden her with any of this. And she never opened the channel either. So it never
right,
just.
right, right. Um, One thing that I think, I mean, it affects the patients as well is when they experience hair loss. I've also heard, you know, again, children talk about how that was a stressful moment. Was that something that bothered you, and how did you all cope with it? Krina, starting with you.
It did not bother me because I knew that that was one of the consequences after having chemotherapy. So I was normal with it. I mean, I did not have any such wow reaction or anything of that sort.
Right. But did you think it was bothering your mother, and did you try and do
It
anything
did
to?
it did bother her. I think it bothers every woman out there.
Mm,
So my mom is still on oral medication right now, and hair loss is still one of the things which she faces even now. So I think it bothers her, but I think she also like she accepts the situation very practically.
right. Right. Okay. Anjali?
My mom was so sure that she was going to take off all her hair because she didn't want it shedding all around the house. And so she just shaved it. And I was very carefully watching her for any signs of distress about this whole thing because I was fully committed to shaving off my own head in solidarity if
Mm,
I felt that she was uncomfortable. But that never happened. She took to it quite gracefully. So I didn't have to go through with it.
right.
And it never bothered me.
Right. Right. Um, and you, Ashwati?
Just like in Anjali's case, after the first cycle of chemo, around 14 days after that, my mom started losing hair and she decided to rip it off like a band-aid and get it done. So she shaved her hair. Uh, I found it as a 10-year-old very amusing, the fact that she went wig shopping after that. And
Mm,
I was really excited about that. But then she really didn't use a wig, even when she had to go out after that, when she went to work 1.5 years after her treatment ended. She didn't use it. She found using pretty scarves very liberating. And compared to all of the other side effects that chemo has, hair loss is pretty inconsequential, even though it's the most visible uh, side effects. So she took to it very gracefully, as she said.
right. So, what in your view was one of the more difficult side effects that you kind of have observation of?
She was tired all the time. Actually, this was quite a long time ago, so I don't really recollect being there with my mom a lot
Mm,
during that period. She was tired and like nausea, all of that, and basically getting through the day was difficult, right? And she fought through it all like really bravely. But uh, I'm saying if you weigh the
yeah,
consequences,
I know.
yeah,
I know. Yeah, I guess watching a mother go through nausea and some of the other stuff can be quite challenging as well, and probably more challenging than the
it's
initial shock of hair loss.
yeah, it's more mental than it is physical in this case, right? Like the amount of burden that she was carrying around. So
Mm,
yeah,
right. Um, and you, Anjali, was there any other aspect of the treatment that kind of affected you?
So it was actually my mom's reconstructed breast and the scar that it had that really affected me because I was a proper caregiver of sorts, and I would be the one changing her bandages every day, like when she was freshly out of the hospital, and so
Mm,
I'd seen that wound just in a very bad state, and that is very difficult for me to get over, even like now.
even today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, no, I can imagine that can be quite stressful. Um, Trina, did you have any other side effects that you think uh, were bothering and therefore you observed it?
So I saw that her nails were basically, uh, I don't know
Black.
what's the term, but yeah, her nails were black. Her skin was like, some part of her skin was black. Her dark circles under her eyes. So it's a very jarring situation to see, but
Hmm, right. And were you all scared
sure. Yeah,
right through, or did there come a point where you stopped being scared? Or are you still scared?
I'm still scared by the.
Hmm. What are you scared about?
So in 2019, my mom relapsed,
Hmm.
and but since it was detected pretty early, she did not go through any chemotherapy session. She's still on oral medication right now, but we don't know what will happen in future, right? Nobody can predict anything.
Correct. Correct. So that's
You have
something
no,
that,
you have no other option other than being positive.
true, true. Yeah. Anjali?
I'm still pretty scared. um, I'm extremely paranoid about my mom's health,
Hmm.
uh, to the point, one of my triggers actually, so she had certain lymph nodes taken out of her left arm,
Hmm.
so it's she cannot bear any pressure on that arm, it's dangerous.
Right.
And so I've generalized that fear in a way. If I see anyone else slap their left arm as well, I instantly scream and like try to prevent them from doing that. It's a knee jerk reaction.
Hmm.
So I'm very scared about my mom, yes.
Right. Right. Ashwati?
yes. We can't say what it is, but until now, everything is positive. She's gotten through it, and I'd like to stay positive more than worry about what might be.
Right. Right. And I know you are doing medicine, Ashwati.
Yeah.
Was that a decision triggered by your mother's experience?
Well, I quite always wanted to be a doctor from a small age. Doctor sets the whole shebang, but then
Mm,
this gave me a lot more direction towards this. The thing is, I couldn't be there for my mom in a real caretaker sense like Anjali was, which I really admire, by the way. You were by her side throughout. And I wasn't able to do that right for my mom. So I thought I could do it for others who might be in the same situation. So that was definitely a push towards direction.
right. Right. Um, and I mean, I guess everybody had heard of cancer. What was what did you know about cancer? Did you look up online about it? Did you try and find out information? Because this was, I guess, for you, it's 10 years ago, so it's about 2011, and you were young, but the two of you were in your teens, and internet was, it's like 6 years ago or something, so internet was quite, I mean, available, right? So, uh, what did you think of? What was your impression of cancer, and did you look up online for information? Um, Krina, you want to go first?
Sure. So the general notion was that if someone has cancer, then there are less chances of survival. I
Hmm.
mean, that was the general notion back then, and even if you ask some people now, they'll say the same thing now.
Right.
So, I mean, the situation has changed considerably now.
Correct.
But back then, I had this general notion only
Hmm.
that there are less chances of survival.
And did you look up online?
I don't remember exactly, but
Hmm.
I think I must have, I guess. I don't remember it now.
Right. Right. Anjali?
I think much like Reena, yeah, I just had that same notion that cancer means death. But when I was told otherwise by my parents, I was somewhat mollified. But I never looked it up because
Hmm.
I was afraid of what I'd find. So I just limited myself to the information I absolutely needed to look after my mom, and that was it. I would never look up anything else.
Right. Right. Um, Ashwati, anything else to add?
No, it was there wasn't it isn't a taboo topic, right? Cancer,
Hmm.
but then there are whispers of it all around you. um,
Right.
Media, movies, and everywhere it is portrayed as this. When they want a character off the script is when they bring cancer in, and that
Correct.
makes a very morbid paints a very morbid picture of cancer.
Hmm.
So that's what I had seen until then. So that's what made me scared.
Yeah. I do keep hoping that there'll be a day when, they will have uh, a mother or a father who's a cancer survivor as a character, so who's lived with it 20 years ago. I mean, he or she had cancer. Um, did I mean, I know, Anjali, you said about people saying insensitive things. Were there any other incidents that come to mind about people being insensitive, or just saying stuff which, you know, doesn't is not helpful? Ashwati?
There was this one situation where a person in school, when I confided in her, went on to say, "Oh, your mom has breast cancer. That's okay. It's just breast cancer, right?" So I felt maybe she had a notion that it was comparatively a better cancer to have than the rest, or something made her say that, and that made me feel that she was discounting what my mom was going through by saying that, and I did not like it at all. So
Mm,
I kind of stopped talking about it for a while after. I mean, it wasn't really nice of her to say that,
mm,
as if one kind is better to have than the other. So that put me off quite a bit.
right, right. Krina, you have anything? Any
Uh,
experience?
Fortunately, we were surrounded by very supportive family members and friends. So I did not encounter any such situation.
Right, right. Um, Anjali, anything else you want to add?
I think, like what I mentioned about the teachers earlier, I encountered that with most people around me, just telling me not to cry,
Mm,
and to be brave and strong for my mom. But that's counterproductive because then I don't get the emotional release that I need.
mm,
So
correct.
I think that can be insensitive as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. How did it affect your studies? Again, we are Indians, Asians, so studies is important. How did that um, play out? Let's start with, I think, Krina, you would have you had board exams or something?
Yes, I was in 10th grade back then. So I was studying the subjects which I did not like. My timetable was packed. I
Mm,
had my tuitions who gave us tons of homework, even more than the school gave us homework. So I did not get time to acknowledge what was going around me. And frankly, I was a bit under pressure because
mm,
of board exams.
correct.
No, it was such a big deal back then. Now that I think about it, 10th grade marks don't even matter for me now.
Right. So that would that be something you'll tell somebody else who's going through, say 10th grade board exams or whatever, and they have a family member who is affected. What
I
will you
mean,
tell?
I tell them to balance things out, like not take so much pressure of just studying things which you don't like. I mean,
Mm,
it's just an exam at the
right,
end. So
right. Anjali, in terms of your academics.
I kind of took it upon myself to keep my grades up, solely so that it wouldn't concern my mom and make her
Mm,
think I was being derailed from my studies because of her treatment. And I think I kept up my grade average pretty easily. It wasn't that difficult because I was pretty motivated as well.
right, right. Yeah. I know, Ashwati, you were young, but still, at every stage, it seems like,
Yeah,
you
I'm the exception in all of this.
know.
But then, as a fifth grader, I had been heavily reliant on my mom for projects and for teaching me everything. And she
Mm,
knew every part of my syllabus more than I did until then.
right,
And as soon as this came by, I kind of took it upon myself to study. And it was kind of my coping mechanism. I shifted to my own room. I kept to my books. I started reading a lot more. So yeah, that helped me get through it. As Krina said, there was motivation in studies.
right, right. We have a couple of questions that have come in. Let me start taking them. And if there are others who have questions, please do write them in as well. Do you think this experience will affect any of your life decision? I
Well, I
guess
guess
whether
it
it's
already
marriage,
has. Oh,
it's
in
all,
that. Okay.
yeah, no, go ahead. But even that's important, as you said, it does affect career.
Yeah. So I feel being a doctor, even if later I need to be supportive for her or for anybody else, I'll be able to do that now. So from the career point of view, I think this really pushed me towards that direction.
Right. But in terms of uh, you know, so if when you are ready to get married, do you think you will talk about this to your, partner to be? How do you think you'll address that? Because that sometimes for a lot of people seems to be a problem. We've had people say that, unfortunately, you know, parents say that their daughters can't get married. We had somebody who had childhood cancer herself, and she struggles to get married, and so on. So, how do you think? The reason I'm asking is because again, there is this whole perception about genetic, right? And most people assume that they don't differentiate that some cancers are genetic and some are not, or not everybody has genetic cancers, but or hereditary cancers. But irrespective of that, and there is the environmental aspect, right? I mean, we can all get cancer, hereditary or not. So, uh, but how would you address that? Have you thought about it? So, starting with you, Ashwati, on that first.
To be completely honest, I wasn't aware that this was something that impeded further life decisions in such a huge way. But I don't. Everybody has mutations of
Mm.
different kinds, and depending on the environment we are living in now, with the pollution now, and anybody is at risk of cancer. And the risk of a daughter having cancer if her mom had it is not such a huge percentage that sure, genetic testing and all is an option, but I don't think it should evoke all the stigma that you just mentioned, which I wasn't aware of before, to be honest.
Right, right. Okay. Um, Krina?
I mean, my mom did. Matlab, we did not have any cancer history. So
Mm.
my mom is like the first case of having breast cancer. So I think it should not affect anyone, even my future spouse, if I do tell them about this. It will
Right,
be like just a casual conversation that my mom had breast cancer back then. I was 14 years old. That's that.
right, right. Anjali, you have anything to add?
Um, in my case, my mom got the test for this. I think it was HER2 negative. So yeah, it's not genetic, but we do have an extensive family history of cancer. So it's it's quite likely that I might get it sometime in my life, and that's why I am a bit sensitive to cancer scares, even though I'm pretty young.
Mm.
And yes, I am a bit more aware and cautious, like conducting breast examinations from the age of 14 itself.
Wow. Mm.
Yeah.
Good, good. Sheetal, you have anything to add there?
No, I'm really surprised about the breast self exam. Anyone else does that? Aswati,
Mm,
Tina?
I haven't.
We
Have
were
you?
familiar with it,
You're
right from the
familiar with the test though?
yes.
With the exam, self exam. Okay.
One follow-up question, I guess, in a way. How okay will you be with studying abroad? And it's interesting because we do have somebody here, or leaving mom for extended periods of time. So, Anjali, I know you're studying in Melbourne. Did you think about should I or should I not? Did this come into your decision-making uh, process at all?
I think I think the thing for me is I do tend to internalize my mom's dreams for me a bit,
Mm,
and I know that she wanted me to pursue what made me happy, and she was really insistent that I go do the degree I really wanted to do, and I suppose that kind of propelled me to take the step and move away from her and be secure in the knowledge that my father was there to take care of her,
mm,
and I should do this while I can.
right, right. Krina?
My mom would wish. I mean, my mom would. I think my mom would be okay if I go overseas to study because I think she'd want that. I think she'd want me to go out there and settle and have a life which is nice.
Mm,
So,
but
and I'm pretty confident in my father too.
right. But how would you look at it? Would you be okay?
I think I'd be okay with it. I mean, obviously, I'll have to think a lot about it. I
Right.
mean, it's not just something I can think of in 1 minute and answer. I think I'll have to like really think about it.
Mm,
And is that decision harder if you're an only child?
Yes, I am an
Right.
only child. Yes.
Correct. Anjali is the same for you, right? You're an only child. Aswati, are you far away from home?
No, I'm a day scholar, so
Oh, okay.
yeah.
right. Um, you talked of being scared. Does that reduce over time? Like, for instance, I mean, Ashwati, for instance, it's almost 10 years for your mother. Um, Obviously, for Krina, unfortunately, your mom's had a relapse in 2019. So it's again kind of how's that experience been of when it came back? Um, what did you feel? And you were older, obviously. So, what did you feel about that?
At first, I was anxious. We were all scared and anxious because at that time we did not know if mom will receive chemotherapy session, because it's never meant to be easy. Chemotherapy
Mm,
sessions are always hard.
correct.
So, but when we got the news that she is not going to receive any chemotherapy session, I think we were all a bit relieved. I think the side effects are still there in oral medication, but compared to chemotherapy, it's still like very less.
Right.
So, so that was a relief for all of us.
Right. Okay. Um, sorry, Anjali, you have anything to add to? Was a question before.
I think the fear needs to be talked out during the time it's freshest to for it to actually dissipate.
Mm,
Uh, I feel because I ended up bottling all of that up, it didn't go away for me. And it's been 5 years, over 5 years since, and I am still not quite over it.
and have you considered talking to a counselor, general counselor, a
Yes,
psychologist?
I have, especially because, funnily enough, this whole session has uncovered a lot of things for me. So
Mm,
I think it's time I talk to a therapist or a counselor. Yeah.
right. Right. Yeah, I know. I do appreciate that, y'all are coming and talking, but I suspect that this would have uh, kind of brought back memories that you were trying to, um, I guess, suppress maybe. Uh, so yeah, thank you for coming forth.
And I think
Shita,
the message should be that you can always go and see a counselor, no matter how many years have passed. If you still have some dwelling issues, then it's never too late.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a good point. That and it's true. It doesn't. I mean, while you're right, the earlier you do it, the better. But it's never too late. So I think that's a message to even the people out there. Um, any message to other parents going through cancer in terms of how they should communicate with their children, how can other friends and families come forth and support, um, and is there any age that is too young um, to have this conversation? So let's start. Krina, you?
Um, so I think the common advice I'd like to give to the parents as well as the children is that keep all the lines of communication open. If as a parent you notice some unusual behavior in your child, I think you should initiate some kind of conversation with them, or maybe encourage them to go for therapy. I mean, when I was 14, I we were not aware of this term called therapy. I think mental health was not prioritized back then.
Mm,
So, and I also understand the viewpoint that sometimes young teens are too, uh, I mean, they're not mature enough to understand what's going on.
right,
So, I mean, for example, I was not mature enough of what was going on because I had a very packed schedule back then.
right,
So, I think there should be some sort of a conversation between parents and between children. And even when it comes to parents, I think they are a bit overwhelmed at times.
correct.
Even they cannot open up. For instance, my father, he never opens up in front of anyone.
Mm,
So I think we should also encourage them to go for therapy in case they need it.
true. I think very wise. Um, Anjali?
I think it would also be beneficial if parents realize that they might not be the safe space that the child needs at that point of time.
Mm,
Um, because my father, much like Tina's, was very emotionally closed off. And I couldn't really approach him about this, and neither could I approach my mom because she was at the center of the treatment. So it would have been better if there was some other adult I could have talked it out with without feeling the guilt of burdening my parents.
Right.
So even though you might think you're the closest to your child, it you may not be the best person, I suppose.
Mm,
Not all the time.
right. Right. Uh,
Aswati,
Can I ask a question, please?
sure, sure, sure.
Yeah.
You want me to repeat the question?
you're on mute,
I
Aswati.
actually have a voice noise disturbance in the back. That's why. Can I answer the
Okay.
next question, please?
Yeah, yeah. So the question was, what would be your advice to other parents, or even, as Prina said, the other children going through this, in terms of, you know, I mean, I think both of them talked about communication, but is there anything else you want to add, or you want to talk about communication itself?
I think the kids might have a lot of questions that go unanswered just because they don't come out with it and no one asks them. The open lines of communication that were mentioned most definitely have to be there. And I feel uh, oftentimes many things go unaddressed because the parents think they are saving their kids from the sorts of like dumping all of their grief upon them. The situation is pretty fragile, right? So I believe that the kids should be encouraged to come up with questions and should not be left confused about what is going on.
Mm,
Information should be given, but in an age appropriate manner, as we already mentioned. You wouldn't want to discharge all the sordid details, including the surgery and the chemo, on a very small child. Nor
correct.
would you want to keep a 15 or 16-year-old uninformed by protecting them. So,
Right.
finding the sweet spot in the middle and keeping them apprised of what's going on will help them deal with it much better.
Right. Right. Excellent. Um, Also, I think one of the things, like I think a couple of you mentioned that, or in fact, all of you mentioned that you all found ways to make yourselves useful, because I think you do want to feel useful, right? When all of this is happening in the house, you want to, at least once you are, I mean, if you're very young, maybe not, but I think from the age of 7, 8, you kind of want to help, or, be useful. What would be your suggestions, for how, again, that communication can happen from parents, in terms of making their teenagers or even younger children feel useful?
I feel letting the kids take responsibility for their own work first, rather than
Mm,
going and helping mom with something that is more complicated. Pack your lunch in the morning, get yourself ready for school. So you feel
right.
responsible, like I'm reducing my parents' burden. For a
Right.
very small kid, I think that would be
That's a
perfect.
good, yes, that's a good one. Yeah. Anything, Anjali or Krina, you want to add?
Frankly, I just looked after myself. I did my homework. I managed school and tuitions and everything.
Mm,
So that was that was the least I could do back then, I guess.
right. And but I guess if they had just said that, um, as Ashwati said, by doing this, you are helping the family. So
Right.
if that is actually expressed by, an adult, it probably helps, right? So to tell a child that, okay, if you clean up your room and keep it clean, or you get up and make your own breakfast, or you don't fuss about your food, that helps, the patient. So I think that framing that, I think, is helpful as well, because otherwise you're figuring out that, okay, maybe this will help or maybe it won't help, but okay, this is the least I can do, right? So, and not everybody might come up with, uh, you girls decided that, yes, focusing on your academics was a way to help, but maybe the others might not be able to get to that decision as well. So I think it would help. Yeah, Anjali, you were saying something.
Yeah, I was a lot more involved in my mom's caretaking aspect,
Correct.
because my father was often out of town. So I feel that really helped in a way, because even then my parents used to tell me that you've been very helpful, and
Mm,
after the treatment as well, they do emphasize that I did a lot of things around the house,
mm,
and it does help. Even if like I used to wake up an hour earlier before school to make my mom fresh soup every morning, because she had to drink that, and I had to do all of these tasks throughout the day. And
oh,
even though it was, I suppose, physically taxing, because I was also in my 10th grade,
mm,
uh, it did help to know that I wasn't just a burden around the house.
mm, right. Right. Um, Let me see if there's any other questions from the audience. I know there are a couple of uh, positive statements, somebody sending hugs. Okay. Somebody says worrying is a waste of time. Yeah, okay. Um, all right. Anything else, Sheetal, you want to ask, or you want to ask each other? Um, did you all come across along the way? Have you all come across any useful books or anything that you would want to, books, movies that you would want to recommend for anybody else? You know, you saw something, you read something, and said, okay, this would have really helped me if I'd seen it then. No.
There was this one book, but it's called All About Breast Cancer.
Mm,
It's actually it was being written and illustrated around the time my mom was diagnosed. So we got to have the manuscript, as a result of which I could flip through the pages, and it had a lot of real life stories of patients, which made it all the more human rather than
right,
a mention of cells and
right,
cytokines.
right, right.
Do you also wish you would have connected with other people like you are doing today, with other kids who were going through a similar experience?
I would have, I guess. I
Yeah.
would have.
Mm,
And even now, so you can still sort of share that experience easily with somebody else who's gone through it, right? Instead of trying to explain it to somebody new. I mean, it's a different connect altogether, I'm sure.
so do you have you, have any of you spoken to other children, or this is the first time you're coming and talking about this? You know, have you had other, say, breast cancer patients say, why don't you talk to my child? Has that ever happened?
No, not in my case.
But then in one of my mom's treatment at Chennai Breast Center, their support group,
Right,
in their meetings, I got to speak uh, in one of the sessions. So
right,
then I came in contact with a lot of people who were in the similar boat.
correct. Yes, that's how I came to know about you. So, right. Okay. Um, all right. Anything else? Anybody else wants to, any final words? The one thing that you would want the audience to know? Ashwati?
I feel, again, from the perspective of a 10-year-old, children are like sponges. They are they're observing everything that is happening in the course of the treatment. But despite that, when you don't tell them what's going on, they can feel out of the loop, which
Mm,
can lead to a lot of confusion. So if only that can be mitigated, it would be the best way to deal with it for a child that age.
right, right. Good. Krina?
Um, Keep your lines of communication open. That's what I said earlier.
Mm, okay,
Communication is the key.
right, right. Um, Anjali, any final thoughts as we close?
Yeah, I guess to actual kids going through this, I just want to say that it's okay to feel terrible. It's you're not being too weak or vulnerable if you let yourself feel the pain of a parent having cancer. Um, as long as you push through it and do what needs to be done, um, you don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay.
Correct. Yeah, I
I'd
think
also like to
that's
say that if anybody needs help, it's always available, but not everyone asks for it. So if
Mm.
you take that step by yourself, I think that's the best way to go.
right. Thank you. And I think to all listeners, we'd like to say that look, if anybody needs help, you can also reach out to us at Patients Engage. We will connect you to the right resources, or find people that you can talk to, or even share experiences with. So thank you, Ashwati, Anjali, and Krina for coming. And I know it's not easy. I know this must have, brought up a lot of memories that you would have wanted to forget. But I think it is an important conversation that needs to be had. So thank you once again. And thank you to our audience who has been there, and to your parents who've, supported you coming here as well. Um, and yeah, on behalf of Sheetal and me, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are a few thank yous coming. Stop the live stream.